Freddie, can we agree on what the other mind's problem is? If words like pain and sadness have meaning for me in virtue of standing for something I experience inwardly, how can they also mean something which I don't experience inwardly, such as other people's pain and sadness? Would you agree with that statement?
I think that's certainly part of the problem. I think that there are two parts of the problem. First, how can I attach meaning to attributing experiences to persons other than myself? And secondly, given that this is meaningful, how can I have any right to believe that they are having experiences? I think there are two parts of the problem.
You do in fact distinguish these two parts in the problem of knowledge.
I believe I did, yes. I can't now remember what exactly I said, but certainly I think that they are connected but distinguishable.
Now, I think that the difference between us is going to be that I think that the way of tackling the problem, as I stated it, is to question whether words do have these sort of words do have meaning for me in virtue of standing for things I experience inwardly, whereas I think you accept that statement of what I call the meaning problem and would go on to try and answer it in the terms in which it's stated.
Well, yes, I mean, I certainly do think that my understanding of words like pain, pleasure, anxiety, and any mental words does derive certainly from my having certain experiences. I certainly hold that. And I think there's no question of that. I mean, are you disposed to dispute it?
It seems to me that these notions like pain and sadness and so on only have meaning for a person if he can do two things. He can both use them of himself, but also use them of other people. And I'm not saying that one comes before the other. I think the Cartesians do rather suggest that first-person uses of psychological words come first, and that then there's a problem of how to apply them to others.
Well, it's complicated, isn't it? I mean, clearly a child learns to use words like this by being in certain situations where his parents or his nurse or whoever tell him, oh, it must have hurt so much, because they observe him showing signs of pain. And then he comes to understand what hurting is through having the feeling. And also he's told by other people who exhibit similar behavior, they're in pain also, and in some way he attributes the same feeling to them. Now, I'm not sure the question of which comes first makes much sense here. I mean, what I certainly want to claim is that unless he had these feelings, he wouldn't understand the word.
Yes.
And certainly he's taught the word, the meaning of the word, in social situations. What I claim is that one can detach the word from the social situations in which one learns it and make it refer simply to the actual experience.
So you do make the situation the sort of primary thing?
Well, yes, but I who see disagree with Wittgenstein and the Wittgensteinians in supposing that the world is somehow saddled with the situation in which it's learnt. It seems to me that the fact that it's learnt such situations is, or anyhow comes to be, irrelevant to its meaning.
I think I disagree with Wittgensteinians insofar as they may suggest that the other person use is primary. I mean, I think there are some things which Malcolm says which lend themselves to this interpretation, and I disagree with that. But I would make what we've just called the situation the primary thing, and out of this situation emerge the two different uses, the first-person use and the other-person use.
But do you want to make them different? I mean, do you want to say that when I say of myself I'm in pain, and when you say of me he is in pain, and we are both speaking truly, we aren't referring to the same fact?
No, indeed, we're referring to the same fact. I'm not going to go into... I'm not a behaviourist.
You're not a behaviourist?
I'm not a behaviourist, no.
And if you're not a behaviourist, then you can't then suppose that he is in pain, said by me of you, refers only to your behaviour. It refers to something else besides, namely to a feeling I attribute to you.
Well,
and then the question is, what is the connection between the two, and what justification have I in attributing the feeling to you on the basis of your behaviour?
I think it's that I don't go along with the language which talks of referring, of a word having meaning in virtue of referring to something. I think I question this way of talking, well, for Wittgensteinian reasons.
But I mean, all right, let's give up the word referring, if it bothers you. I am saying of you that you are in a certain mental state.
Yes.
And I'm saying it on the basis of your exhibiting certain behavior, your showing certain physical signs, perhaps including your uttering certain words, making certain noises. Now, this is, in your view, not an entailment. It doesn't follow from the fact that you exhibit these physical signs that you are in this state.
No.
And if it's not an entailment, there must therefore be some other relation. And I want to say, I think, that one is inductively connected with the other. It is a kind of factual inference that very often, near as often as not, when people behave this way, they do have these feelings, and I would want to put it just right in this way. Now, you, I think, disagree with this, but I can't make out what your position is.
Well, I don't want to be driven into the position of having to choose between its being an inductive relationship involving an argument from analogy and its being an entailment relationship involving my being a behaviourist. I don't think one has to be driven into that position.
Well, if you are not going to be driven to this position, or think you don't have to be driven into it, then you must provide some third possibility. What is it?
Well, I think that to account for this, one has to consider what sort of question the question, does something have a mind, is. One has to consider this question and relate it to questions which might be asked about other people, whether Freddie has a mind. Now, the latter question is the philosophical one. I think that I would characterize the philosophical question in this way. The question, has this thing a mind, where we're confronted with something that's come from outer space, let's say.
Yes. Well, let's take this dog.
Yes.
This hasn't come quite from outer space. Has he got a mind?
All right, this dog. Now, the way in which I'd answer the question, has this dog got a mind, would be to see in what way it resembled human beings. And if we could somehow teach it to communicate with us, not in the way in which dogs do communicate, but in some rather more sophisticated way, then I think we would seriously start considering that the dog has a mind. Now, the point is this, that the way in which we settle the question, has this thing, this dog, a mind, is by comparing it with human beings.
Well, yes, to a certain extent you're right. It's not perhaps quite so elaborate as that. I mean, I call it, and it answers me, therefore it hears.
Yes.
Therefore it has, in some sense, perceptions. I hit it, I don't, but if I were to hit it, it would squeal, and then so this would be an indication that it suffered pain and so on.
Yes.
Clearly, I'm not going to attribute anything of this sort to this chair, because it doesn't react in the same sort of way. Now, the question surely is, what am I doing when I do this? I mean, when I call to it and it responds, and I say, she hears me, is this simply saying, yes, she does respond and she always responds? Is this simply fitting into a pattern of her behaviour? Or am I going a little beyond this and attributing to her not only behaviour, but also, well, I use the old-fashioned word, consciousness? Now, I think here take the old-fashioned view, and I can't make up whether you take it or not. You seem to be hedging, if I may say so, without it being offensive.
No, by all means. If I may develop the line that I was just starting, to answer the question, has this dog a mind, we compare it with human beings.
Yes,
I mean, in what respect it's like human beings. Now, my saying this doesn't mean that I have to say that the question which we're answering isn't one about whether the dog has a mind, whether it has thoughts, whether it has feelings, and so on. The same sort of question as we don't raise with regard to other human beings. I mean, I don't raise the question with regard to you, have you thoughts? I mean, this isn't a practical question. It's a philosophical question, and my position is that it's a philosophical question which arises only if you accept certain presuppositions of a Cartesian kind, but also involving the notion that words having a meaning for me is a matter of my associating it with something which is interior, private, and experience.
See, it seems to me that once you accept the distinction or the division between behaving in certain ways and being conscious, once you are not a behaviorist or a physicalist of any kind, once you don't identify consciousness with behavior or with brain states, then you have a problem, quite apart from your theory of reference. Now, it's certainly true that I attribute possibly consciousness to the dog, insofar as she resembles a human being, if what you mean by this is that she exhibits something like human responses, showing signs of pain, coming when called. I don't think it's in virtue of her physically resembling human beings. It seems to me possible, but I should attribute consciousness also to a machine. Supposing there were a machine that did seem to not only to display intelligence the way machines do, but also show signs of feeling. It seems to me that what is important is the behavior.
Yes.
But then the problem we haven't really got down to yet is how the behavior is related to the attribution of consciousness. I'm prepared to settle for the difficult position of saying it's an inductive step. But
Yes.
you want to say there is a third possibility. We haven't had this made clear. I'm perfectly prepared to say no third possibility, so it's on the onus on you is to provide one.
I don't think I can say more than what I have just said, that the question, has this thing a mind, is settled by comparing the thing with human beings. For me, the question, has this thing a mind, doesn't arise with regard to a human being.
But it can very easily be made to arise, can't it? I mean, all one has to do is separate the behavior from the feeling and then say, well, given that someone is exhibiting this behavior, what ground have we for supposing that he also has the feeling? Admittedly, I mean, there are words like depression that are used indifferently to cover not indifferently, but to use in such a way that they cover both behavior and what is supposed to lie behind the behavior. But if one can dissociate these two logically, then you can always put the question.
I think if you take that line, though, then you have the same problem as you have in other cases of skepticism, for instance, with regard to physical objects. I mean, you can dissociate something's looking like something's looking blue with its being blue. I mean, there isn't a relationship of entailment there either.
Well, I think the sceptical problems are genuine in all cases. I don't think they're quite the same in every case. I mean, on another occasion, I'm very happy to discuss it in connection with physical objects. But I do think the skeptic has to be taken seriously, and I do take him seriously. For example, throughout our discussion, you've been assuming that there's no question with regard to human beings. And we raised the question with regard to the dog and with regard to the machines, and you said, well, attributing minds to them is assuming they're like human beings, as though there were no question possible, not even a philosophical question, but what human being had minds. Now, I think there is a question with regard to other than oneself. I think that, obviously, in practice, I don't doubt that you are similar to myself, that you think and feel and suffer pain and so on and so forth. But I think theoretically there is a problem of what right I have to make this assumption about you. And I regard it as a perfectly genuine problem. I don't think you can start at a point where the skeptic's problems have been dismissed.
I think it would be not right for me to say that I don't think there's any problem at all. I mean, I'm a sort of suppressed Cartesian. I think that you're more, that Cartesianism in you is more rampant than it is in me.
Yes, but I mean, you suppressed it, but well, let's now operate a kind of analysis on you and bring these dark, suppressed things to light.
Okay.
Bring it out into the open. What do you do about it? I mean, all right, let me present myself as a Cartesian. What do you say against me?
That you are saddled with the problem.
Certainly. And therefore have to set about trying to solve it.
Yeah.
But now you don't abolish the problem by suppressing it. On the contrary, as we know from psychoanalytical theory, it's very, very dangerous to suppress things in this way.
What I can do is to show how the problem has arisen by, in virtue of holding wrong ideas about how words have meaning.
No, but this seems to me what you conspicuously failed to show. Because in a sense, at the very beginning, you conceded that the behavioral system wasn't tenable.
Indeed.
And once you concede this, it seems to me then the problem must recur. Whatever view of meaning you have, once you allow that saying he is in a state of he has a feeling of depression isn't entailed by he exhibits behavior associated with depression, then you have the problem of the passage from one to the other. And I think it is a very serious problem, and I'm not entirely satisfied with the conventional answer, which is the one fact that I suppose hold, namely that this is a reasonable hypothesis. I would say that the attribution of mental states to others was justified as a way of explaining their behavior. I mean, this is the view I hold. And so it does remain an open question whether you, as far as I'm concerned, you have a mind or not. I regard it as overwhelmingly probable that you have.
Yes.
Now, you, I think, want to say that it's certain. I mean, or in my position, I should be certain that you had, and alas, I'm not.
No, I don't think I do want to say it's certain, because to say it's certain is to suppose that there is a problem here which we can settle in one way or another. I think I would rather say that the question doesn't arise in the case of other people.
It has arisen. I've posed it. And now you've got to show me that in posing it I made some mistake. I say that once you allow, as you do allow, that the fact that you have a feeling of depression doesn't logically follow from the fact that you look gloomy, sound gloomy, and so on, then it seems to me that this alone commits you to the problem. I mean, the problem arises once this admission is made. You say it doesn't. Why doesn't it?
Well, I think if you put the problem in those terms, then, as I said before, it is one which also arises with regard to physical objects.
Well, yes.
But yet, there is a difference between the two.
There too.
But don't you draw a distinction between the two sorts of problems? I mean, aren't you more ready to be a phenomenalist with regard to physical objects than you are to be a behaviorist with regard to other minds? I feel that the other minds problem is more of a problem for you than...
this is true. I am more ready to be a phenomenalist with regard to physical objects, though I would no longer be a complete phenomenalist. I have a very complicated theory, which still leans a bit towards phenomenalism. I don't want to say that the problems in all these cases are solved in the same way. I do want to say that they arise in each case, that there is a question to discuss in each case. Now, it seems to me that you want to get rid of the other mind's problem by saying it isn't a genuine problem at all. And I have argued that it is a genuine problem once you take the first step, which is what you have taken, of not making a logical equivalence between behavior and feelings. Now, you want to argue that even though one takes this first step, still there's no problem, and here I am puzzled, and you haven't yet explained to me why you think there isn't, or how you can justify your claim.
I think I'd want to distinguish between a question about a particular case. We have a particular case where there is behavior. Is there the corresponding feeling? And a question about the whole class of other minds.
Yes.
Now, in the particular case, certainly you can have the behavior without the feeling. But I don't feel that this is the case, that this raises the philosophical problem. The philosophical problem is rather the one where you distinguish between behavior statements and other mind statements as a whole.
I don't know what I follow you. Do you want to say, though, that it might be true in a particular case that I was mistaken in attributing feelings to someone? Let us say that someone had constructed an extremely plausible robot.
Yes.
I couldn't be mistaken in general.
Well, it is a different sort of question, isn't it, about the whole class?
Well, I'm prepared to say that, logically speaking, I could be mistaken in general. And I'm prepared to deny it as a different sort of question. I'm perfectly prepared to say that logically speaking, it is not contradictory for me to suppose that I am the only person in the world who has feelings and thoughts and so on.
Yes, I don't think I'd put it in the form not contradictory, but rather it's a question which it's somehow illegitimate to ask with regard to a whole class.
Well, how could it be illegitimate? I mean, someone's said you shouldn't ask it. Wittgenstein, for example. I mean, I don't accept that authority. And
I mean, don't put me down as somebody who argues from Wittgenstein as though Wittgenstein was the Pope or something. No, I don't either.
Well, in what sense illegitimate? I mean, I think regard the question as illegitimate if it's contradictory or nonsensical. Now it seems to me this question is neither contradictory nor nonsensical, therefore why legitimate?
I think one can only do it by going to some other realm of questions, like can we question in general whether physical objects continue to exist when unperceived?
Yes, we can. Though I do...
Oh, you'd say we can question?
I think we can. Although I do think this is all a special case because one isn't there questioning it as a matter of fact. I mean, does the lamp actually disappear when I'm not looking? Does it behave oddly and so on? It's not that. But when one can say, is this a useful postulate to make? I mean, I would regard this as a postulate, an assumption that we make in order to organize our experience in certain ways. And one can say, well, possibly one could do without it. And then the answer is, if you try to do without it, you get into such complications, such very complicated laws, it would really be not at all serviceable.
I think what I'd query in this is your use of the term postulate and assumption. I mean, there is a perfectly proper use of the term assumption. Bertrand Russell is said to have assumed that what he read in the Times could be taken on trust
Yes.
until he came down in an air crash off Norway or something. Have I got this right? He came down in an air crash off Norway and then said that when he read in the Times that he'd been killed, he no longer...
Yes, it was another occasion. In fact,
Now-
it was reported to have died in China by some Japanese journalist who refused an interview, and
I'm sorry.
they were so angry they reported him to be dead.
Now, in that case, there is a possibility of finding out that the assumption was justified or not justified.
Mhm.
Now, in the case of do things exist unperceived,
Yes.
is there a possibility of finding out that the assumption is justified or not justified?
Well, there is a way of finding out if the assumption is justified or not justified, but not, of course, quite the same way. I mean, it's justified by the coherence and simplicity which it introduces into one's general picture of the world, one's way of organising one's experience. So it is an assumption. It's not an empirical assumption in the same way.
Not an empirical assumption.
And, of course, equally, attributing conscious experience to others isn't something that I'm going to find out about in the way that I'm going suddenly to get inside your head and see, well,
Yes.
what is there? Sawdust only, or
Yes.
pulsating life, or whatever.
Yes.
No, this again is not something I'm going to find out about in the same way. But there is a difference, and possibly I'm confused in making this difference. I mean, there's a difference, as it seems to me, in that I'm much more inclined to treat the attribution of experience to others as a matter of fact than I am in the case of the unperceived existence of objects. I mean, in a philosophical sense, where I regard this as a choice of a certain form of conceptual system. And the analogy would rather be with scientific hypotheses, where you postulate positrons or whatever as a way of organizing certain empirical data. And it seems to me that your behavior becomes coherent to me if I do attribute thoughts and feelings to you in a way in which it wouldn't otherwise. But I do regard the attribution as not simply a deduction from the behavior, and there you agree with me.
Yes, though I think that we could argue about the meaning of the term behavior, because a distinction is to be drawn between simple motions of people's bodies and water coming from their eyes and things like this.
That's what I mean by behavior.
And that is what you mean by behavior.
Yes.
That's the so that the
Physical
so that
movements.
what they do, their actions,
Mhm.
you wouldn't count as behavior because it has a sort of intentional aspect.
Indeed, indeed. In talking of actions, I'm already putting in on an interpretation. I mean, what I observe is just the water coming from the eyes. And if I say he's crying, I'm already implying that there is a feeling of sadness or whatever, which is already explanatory in my view. I mean, all that occurs at the primary level is just the observation of the movements, the water flowing, the hands moving or whatever. And then I make sense of this by attributing experiences, feelings, intentions, beliefs to you.
Yes.
But this is all theoretical.
Yes.
What I'm given originally to play with is just the water falling.
Don't you feel that you're at odds with common sense on this?
If I were, I wouldn't care tuppence. But at odds with common sense doesn't see things in these terms. I mean, common sense on the whole doesn't philosophize. When it does, it philosophizes badly. I mean, this is no stick to beat me with.